Welcome to the 2024 NFL Draft. We're grading every single pick from the first round. Luka, Pock, Huddle Up, times DSC, I guess, is the little
the Digital
collab
Sports
we're
Center
doing.
crew, hold on.
Yeah, exactly.
Are we gonna
Christopher
fight?
Hine, Aaron Kerr. I know, we're on both sides of the table.
I don't like our chances.
I don't either. I'm all bark, no bite, that's for sure. Okay, we're starting with pick number 1. Caleb Williams going to the Chicago Bears. I'll grade this one. We're going to make it quick. It's an A+. Knocked this one out of the park. They did everything right by trading Justin Fields and getting a quarterback that's kind of viewed as this generational guy. You love the arm strength. You love the accuracy, the ability to create inside the pocket. I think he probably, an underrated ability of his is just to play quarterback. Like, he's accurate. He goes through his progressions, his reads. He's very
Mahomes
good
light.
with that.
He's got a lot of the Mahomes comps,
Exactly.
which makes sense. I'm going to also grade the zipper on his suit an A+, because I've never seen a zipper there. That was also
Dude,
very
I'm
nice.
grading the zipper on his suit of F-.
Oh,
Wow.
Oh, wow.
I was
Okay.
horrid.
We're supposed to be united front here.
Yeah, we're starting off on a terrible
But I think
foot.
this speaks to the pick that we're talking about the suit, because we all knew that this is a pick, and I don't know,
Yeah.
nobody
Dude,
doesn't like
they went out, they loaded up the offense earlier this offseason. You see a quarterback get to come in and actually not have a team that sucks completely. Trevor Lawrence, all the first overall picks come into just a brutal situation. So excited to see it.
A+ of any situation of any quarterback's going to go into. Caleb Williams walking into the best situation for sure.
Yep.
All right, number 2, we have Jayden Daniels. I understand why they made this selection, all being, Cliff Kingsbury's coming into Washington, the athleticism, the mobility. I feel like he kind of fits that mold of the offense that Kingsbury wants to run. Personally, I like the stealing of Drake May a little bit more, but I also understand the sense of urgency in Washington to have someone come in and utilize the weapons like Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson from day one. I'm going to go B on this one. I feel like that's not being too harsh. He won the Heisman Trophy. He's got a lot of traits that you would love to have with a quarterback, and I feel like that dual threat aspect is great as well. He's got one of the best deep balls in all of college football.
So on that point of the deep ball, though, aren't you a little concerned when we're going to see his two best receivers, one of them's going to go real soon, and both are going to go in the first round?
That's definitely a fair
It's
criticism.
got to be a little bit of a question mark when you're aided with that kind of talent. Drake May didn't have anything close to that kind of talent with him.
Obviously, I feel like that's why Jayden Daniels' production was much better than Drake May's. Whereas Drake May, you're clearly picking him off of the traits, what you hope he will become. Jayden Daniels, you know what you're getting a little bit more. There's definitely some room for improvement in terms of his ability to scan the middle of the field and throw sort of different types of passes. I think that'll come. So for now, I'm going to go B.
I like it. I honestly think ceiling-wise, too, if he hits, it's a home run.
Yeah.
If he can work with Cliff Kingsbury. I think the thing that worries me is, Cliff had Kyler. And Kyler was kind of unlocked for a season there for 9 games, and then he wasn't. And it's one of those things where I feel like I've seen this story play out with a guy in Kyler that probably a better passer, I think, maybe coming out of college than you would say Jayden Daniels was, especially given Daniels' 5-year, 6-year college career. So that worries me a little. But I will say, I feel like his floor is maybe a little higher than Drake May, at least at the beginning, because of his scrambling ability, because he has that ability to, okay, if it's not a clean pocket, yeah, maybe he's going to take some more sacks because of it, but I also think that there's a little room there for just safety because of it, where it's he can turn negative plays into a positive early in his career, which is kind of a nice thing to have in your back pocket when you're still trying to learn
Especially
to play
as
the
a
position.
rookie.
Exactly.
He's going to need to learn how to freelance less, though.
A little bit.
That's a big adjustment I'll have to make.
He's also significantly bigger than Kyler is, too. So, I will give him that.
Yeah.
Right? He's got a lot better of a chance to run this Cliff Kingsbury offense well. Going into a position, though, I don't love the talent around Washington, though. So, Caleb Williams went into a perfect position, I think Jayden Daniels is going to have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
All right, Drake May 3, let's grade the pick. Hein?
I hate to do this, but I think you have to grade this an A. Personally, I would have taken him over Jayden Daniels. Love the size, love the arm. Obviously, he needs to work on the accuracy, but that's fine. That's fine. You can work that. What worries me about him, I hope he doesn't get thrust into the starting lineup too soon, because that is a Patriots roster that is very just void of any kind of offensive talent. Their line's not great. I wouldn't want to see him get beat up. I think you kind of give him 7-8 games on the bench to sort of just figure out the NFL game because he is a project. Like there's a ton to like, but he's still a big project.
I love that he can scramble and everything, but if he can dial in and become comfortable staying in the pocket for a little bit and hit those passes that he's been missing, he's going to be probably, like, I would say he could be the best quarterback taken this year.
I have no doubts about that either, too. I feel like when you watch him, it's like he can make every single throw. The supporting cast wasn't great around him. Like, I think the footwork concerns might be because he was just doing what he had to do to just keep his team competitive sometimes. And so I think there's a lot to work with there. And it's a great pick. I agree with you on an A.
Wasn't too long ago the Patriots drafted a first-round quarterback. That was Mac Jones just 3 years ago. Started off promising. I feel like the reason it didn't work out was more on the Patriots failing him with not surrounding him with any semblance of competent weapons. The clock is ticking now in New England in my books. Get this guy some talent around him because the current core that they have right now, it's not putting him in the best situation to succeed.
Real quick, too, with the comp to him and Daniels, we mentioned it before. Daniels had those 2 unreal weapons at wide receiver. Like Josh Allen, we talked about it before, with the accuracy, with the arm strength, this guy played with bums at North Carolina. He had no one doing him any kind of favors, and he kind of got the most out of that.
Yeah, fair.
Eric, you're up with Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, I think you have to go with an A+. Like, I think he's the best player in the draft. Like, if we're taking positional value out of it and just going skill, this is my number 1 player. I think, again, there's not a route he can't run. He's huge. He's the guy. So I think he's going to be a problem for, like, decade plus.
2 underrated parts of his game, the ball tracking. Like, you've seen some of those plays where it's like a ball, it's going over this shoulder and he adjusts on the fly, but is able to fully track that ball and make a catch. Plus, yeah, he can get open a lot, but if he's covered, guy's catch radius is insane. Like, he can make contested catches probably better than anybody in this draft.
I think when you're a Cardinals fan, like the one thing...
Hold on, there's no Cardinals fans.
Sorry. If you're a Cardinals fan out there, having been watching this, I think the one thing you probably have heard throughout the process is like Malik Neighbors is a little closer than we thought to Harrison Jr. in the eyes of some NFL people because of the speed element of it, right? And I think that Harrison is not the fastest guy. Like the yak isn't there with him as it is with Neighbors. But then again, like you've watched guys, if you're a Cardinals fan, like Anquan Boldin, like Larry Fitzgerald, that they had that element to them still, like, but they were physical freaks that when the ball was in the air, it was always there. They could run every route. They were so good at things that you talked about, spacing, knowing where they were on the field, and just physically dominating you. And I feel like that's what Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be.
I think one other point, you mentioned the closeness to Neighbors. I feel like he's been the number 1 receiving prospect for like the last 2 years now. When you have more time to watch and critique a guy, that kind of happens where it seems like other people are closer because you've just been...
What are we going to talk about for the 5 months
and
going
that's
up
the
to the
thing.
draft,
That's why
right?
I think it's like this guy's a home run. Like, and is it really as close as it is with Neighbors, or have we just had a lot of time to critique him?
Yeah. And, like, guy's huge. Is there a single DB that can catch a 50-50 ball with this
No.
guy? No.
All right, I'm grading the pick for the Chargers at number 5. This was kind of the biggest surprise point. They go Joe Alt. I'm going to give it an A. He's the best tackle in the class, and whether he plays on the right side or the left side, they can figure that out, but they've got really 2 solid cornerstone linemen to build around, which is great. I think the debate between receiver, linemen, you could have that conversation a lot, which makes sense if you're a Chargers fan. There are some out there that would have wanted the receiver. This is kind of reminds me of the Sewell, Jamar Chase thing, Bengals, Lions. Worked out great for both of them, and I'm sure whoever takes Neighbors into Dunes 8 is going
Although
to work
Burrow
out great.
keeps getting hurt, so maybe they should have went lineman.
Hey, maybe. But I would say that
Yeah,
they're
drafted
both
a stud,
very
yes,
happy.
yeah.
Exactly. Both are great players, but linemen continue to be kind of the safest picks in the first round as far as hit rate. Receivers are a little more volatile. So great start to the Harbaugh era in Los Angeles. New York Giants, Malik Neighbors.
I'm kind of feeling inclined to go A+. I'm going to go A just because he's not quite the prospect that Marvin Harrison is, but you're getting a guy that gives you a threat to put 6 points up on the board at every single play, and you're injecting him into an offense that has so desperately needed that for years. And yeah, some people were talking that they really like Drake May, that maybe even taking J.J. McCarthy. 12 months ago, you gave Daniel Jones a long-term contract, and I feel like it's on you as an organization to figure that out, because it's a complete embarrassment if you're just going to go and throw that out the door and draft someone and start fresh. Give him some weapons, because he hasn't really had a fair shake in that offense in recent years. Even the year that they made the playoffs, did not have a lot to work with there. So I really like this pick. I'm going to go A.
The thing I love about him, and going into a situation with a bad quarterback. Great stat. He forced the 4th most missed tackles in all of college football last year. That shows me you can get him the ball. You can get him, the suit's amazing. You can get him the ball, like a lot of his highlights, he's burning people deep or whatever, but you can get him the ball in space and he's going to make people miss steady. And if you have questionable quarterback situation like the Giants, that's a good fit to try to maximize a poor quarterback.
I'm just excited to watch him run a beautiful route, just be wide open, and the ball go 4 feet behind him. Like, it's going to be so exciting to watch.
Maybe next year, but hopefully not for
Yeah.
years to come. I will say, too, when you watch his highlights, like, he plays in the slot a lot, too, which I was
I
surprised
think they
at.
said like half of his snaps came from the slot, but he
Yeah.
can also go to the outside.
Absolutely. Well, and you want a guy like that. And an offensive mind like Brian Dable, I think, will find the best ways to get the ball in this guy's hand from any position on the football field. But, like, I think Brian Thomas Jr., the other LSU receiver, which we'll talk about, like, he's kind of primarily an outside guy, which we've seen the best receivers be able to do so many things, like how Justin Jefferson is used in Minnesota, or how Jamar Chase even lines up in the slot. Like, these guys are so versatile, so finding a guy that's so fast, getting him in mismatches on safeties and linebackers and creating even more of advantage for yourself on offense makes sense.
It reminds me a lot of Diggs and the way Dable
I was
used
gonna say
Diggs,
that as well.
And I think that Dable's going to use him the exact same way.
Like, minus
Find
the yak,
mismatches.
yeah, exactly. Like, Diggs might be a better route runner, but like, he's still, like, Neighbors is just faster, so it kind of evens out.
And their Josh Allen's just waiting in the wings.
Let's grade the Tennessee Titans pick now. Hein?
Brant Carthon, you get an A for this pick.
Wow,
this
we are just tossing A's out, but I
No,
agree.
But this is just last year. You have an injury-prone quarterback in Will Levis, who got just dummied last year a lot of games. They were 30th in the NFL in sacks allowed per game, 3.8 a game. How are you going to do anything when your quarterback is getting hit that much? This was the biggest position in need. This is arguably the best tackle on the board in a draft loaded with tackles. Maybe I should give it an A+, but I'm going to leave it at an A because A+s are only for really special moments.
I think we're throwing out a lot of A's because, like, nobody's going off the board and doing anything crazy and
Not
taking
yet.
Alex Leatherwoods out of the blue. Like, you're making the correct picks, and yeah, you get an A for not blowing it. Congrats.
I'll say one thing, and this backs up the A. I actually like J.C. Latham better than I like Joe Alt.
Yeah, same. We were in agreement on that, Puck.
Maybe it's the whole right tackle spot of why he was sort of drafted, and it's obviously team need of what the Chargers wanted, but this is one of my favorite picks.
I love it. And we talked about it before, too. Callahan being the O-line coach there in Tennessee, like, he is one of the best at what he does. So they have invested heavily in that position, not only in last draft with Peter Skoronski, but they get Lloyd Cushenberry at center. Now you have a right tackle. Your offensive line is becoming a strength of your team through coaching, through investment in different ways. It's a great move for the Tennessee Titans.
Whole offense looks good.
Tony
Being
Pollard
honest.
draft stock through the roof.
Wow. Here we go.
Tajay Spears. Getting those goal line touches.
Listen, no shade to Michael Penix Jr. Just team fit, everything in this whole situation, I'm giving it an F. It's the first F. Like, that is a brutal use of your pick. That's a brutal use of your free agency. This entire offseason was a waste for the Falcons, and I don't understand what that just led up to.
I'm so surprised with a new head coach.
Defensive
in
head
Raheem
coach.
Morris and a defensive head coach that, you know what? If they went Brock Bowers, like, yeah, the memes are funny, like, let's laugh at them some more. At least he can help them win right now. When is Michael Penix? It just feels like you said, with his age, this is going to be, it's like they never had a draft pick. Like, in 4 years, we're going to look at this and it's like, they just wasted a pick. Like, every other team is laughing because everyone just gets pushed down the board now, and this guy is not going to help them now. And he may not help them in 4 years either. If Kirk Cousins, like, the only way to explain it is, like, you don't think Kirk Cousins is going to be ready to start the season and maybe an extended period of time.
So go get Gardner Minshew.
Agreed.
Get a bridge
Agreed.
veteran that costs $1 million. And I'll say this because everyone would love to. They're going to compare this to when the Packers went and got Jordan Love.
It's
the
not the
Packers
same.
did that at what 26th overall.
Yes. And they traded up to
This
do it
was
for a
the
guy that's
eighth
significantly
And
younger.
they didn't just bring in Rodgers.
He's
Rodgers
gonna- he's
was at
gonna
the
be
end.
expensive.
They just brought Kirk Cousins in.
He's going to be expensive in 4 years.
Jordan Love wasn't 26 years old.
All right, I'm going to grade the pick. Roma Dunze, Chicago, number 9. A+. They knocked this out of the park. Roma Dunze was my favorite receiver in this draft. As much as everyone loves Marvin Harrison Jr., I get why he went before him, and I get why Neighbors did as well. But I think Dunze can do everything. I think he's the best route runner in the class. A lot of people have compared him to Devontae Adams. I get the comparisons when you watch him play. He can run every route, great in contested catch situations. And I think even if this year his impact isn't felt as significantly because of Keenan Allen ahead of him, maybe in the pecking order, let's say, because I think Keenan will just be Caleb Williams' best friend, in years to come, this is going to be such an amazing move. And for Rome to now have 2 established Pro Bowl guys to learn from as well, this is going to be dynamic in year 1, even better for the Bears down the road. And I love the timeline, too, when you think of what they're trying to do with Caleb Williams on a rookie deal. And now you've got him in lockstep with Rome Odunze. So when they are competing for Super Bowls together, both of these guys are going to be on rookie contracts. And I love that kind of planning and foresight from the Bears. It's an A+.
Yep, Bears say thank you to the Panthers.
Let's grade the pick. Minnesota Vikings, J.J. McCarthy.
I gave the Washington Commanders a B for taking Jaden Daniels. I think I'm going to be in similar range for the Vikings taking J.J. McCarthy, maybe B- because I just think it's like a decent pick. And I believe in him in this situation. If this was the Broncos, if this was the Raiders taking him, I'm much lower on my grade here. But in an offense where he has so much talent around him, with a defense that I also think got better as the year went on, and you got Brian Flores, a great defensive coordinator over there, like, this is a genuine situation where I think playoffs year 1 are a realistic avenue, even if he doesn't start year 1 and maybe he comes in halfway through the year. I really like this player in this particular spot, and I think that they had to take a quarterback, and seeing how quickly they were going off the board, I'm gonna say B-. It's good, it's solid.
I agree with you in terms of situation. He's definitely in a good situation that could probably help him grow to the most of his ability. I just disagree where you said you're in a spot where you have to take a quarterback. That is where I think, like, you just, if you don't like him and you have to take him, just
Clearly
trade
they
out.
like him,
I
though.
know they do.
They do like him.
And I think there's a lot of reasons. I think we're sort of punishing him because he had a good team around him in Michigan. He does have a lot of traits that remind me of a first-round quarterback. His athleticism is, I think, something that not a lot of people like to talk about. He's mobile. He can evade some pressure. And I think he has a decently talented arm. Does he have the arm of a Drake May? And clearly doesn't have the arm of Caleb Williams. No. But I think he has a sort of average to above average arm, NFL arm. And I think he has, he's got to put some weight on, but I think there's definitely a pathway where he can go on to have a long, successful NFL career. And does that mean that he's hoisting up 3 Lombardi trophies? No, maybe not. I'm not ready to make that claim about J.J. McCarthy, but I think in this particular situation, year 1, I'm confident that he can run this offense and get, some good production out of these players.
All right, so the Jets trade back with the Vikings, 1 spot. They still get their tackle, Fashanu, out of Penn State. Hein, what are you grading this one?
Honestly, like, with the draft, it's so synonymous with the Jets making a terrible pick and a bad decision, and they didn't. I give this, I'm going to say an A because they desperately needed O-line help. Like, what they brought in Smith from the Cowboys, who's counting on that guy to do anything? Like, you needed to shore up that O-line. You get one of the best linemen in this draft. It's impossible not to give this an A.
I bet you Aaron Rodgers plays more than 5 snaps this season.
I'm going to grade the pick for this one because I feel like I just have to. It's a C+, and it's just because I have faith in Sean Payton. I liked what I saw from him as a coach. I want to see him work with a young quarterback for the first time and truly develop a guy. To what we've been talking about, though, it's like my concerns are he's the 6th quarterback. There's a reason that every one of those guys went ahead of him, and I think I would have been happier with any one of those guys instead of Bo Nix. The upside, I don't see it as much with what he can become, especially a guy that's already older in age. Like, you just traded for Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson's younger than this guy, which is crazy. Like, I believe more in Zach Wilson maybe turning a corner with Sean Payton than I do Bo Nix. Organizational pressures, owners, coach, timelines not matching up. It all is weird, and based on where Denver's roster is, I could easily see them picking in the top 5 next year and the year after that, which is, you're just wasting a draft pick in my mind then, because if you're picking in the top 5 next year and the year after that, you again need a quarterback. So why didn't you just push this off for 2 years, take better players to
Best
surround,
defensive player available,
exactly, take
anyone you
better
want.
players to surround people with. I would have been happy if Zach Wilson started all year. See what you got in him. Maybe he's good. Who knows?
But
I don't think so, but who knows?
Who's moving? Who was taking Bo Nix at 12?
That's what I
You
mean.
could have slid back to the 20s and still got him. No one was moving up. To
Quarterback
take Bo Nix
row
right
was
now.
over.
Were you-
The
were
Russian
the
quarterbacks
Raiders-
were
I was
done.
going to say, if you're worried about the Raiders, then
Sure,
let the
let the
Raiders
Raiders
take
take
Bo
him, yeah.
Nix.
They must have really seen something in him. But I love that you brought up the fact that you think they'll be back in the top 5 the next couple of years. And that's really the point I was trying to push, because it reminds me of before the Dolphins took Tua, the year before that, they were picking 12th overall, and they weren't terrible, but there was a sense that the walls were about to come crashing down and they were going to be a terrible team. You take a guy like Christian Wilkins, not really a premium position, but a good player. The next year, you were one of the worst teams in football, and you were in a position to draft Tua at 5th overall in a premium spot. And he was the second quarterback off the board. So I know next year they're already projecting it's not going to be the strongest quarterback class. I just can't really find myself buying into this philosophy of what they're trying to do right now, and I can't believe we still have not had a defensive player taken.
Yeah.
And I get it from the sense that, like, last point I'll make, philosophy-wise, this situation reminds me of what the Chicago Bears just went through. Because if the Broncos are picking in the top 5 next year and a team wants to come up, get a quarterback, maybe they get a bunch of assets for it, and that's great. That's totally fine. But then in 2 years' time, you've got all those assets, you're still bad, you haven't surrounded them with as much as you probably could have, and now you're picking a quarterback again. I would have rather, and you know what? It worked out perfectly for the Bears. Like, they had some few rough years, obviously. So, like, if Denver's trajectory is what Chicago did, then I can buy myself into that a little more, knowing that, like, hey, you can get a lot if you finish dead last next year, and you've got the number 1 overall pick, and you drafted a quarterback at 13 or at 12 rather. So you don't need that pick. Let's get some picks. Sure, fine. Like, I can talk myself into that, but it just doesn't make sense for what they're trying to do, which apparently is win now. At 13, the Las Vegas Raiders take Brock Bowers. Bit of a surprise, not gonna lie, bit of a surprise, but Bowers, talented tight end. Eric, you're up with the grades.
Listen, as somebody who has the luxury of having a team that just constantly has great tight ends, having tight ends is awesome, but that's exactly what they are, and Pac said it best. They're a luxury. Taking one top 13 is high for me. I like Brock Bowers. He's a really skilled player. It's the Kyle Pitts era for me. Like, it's really early. I don't know. I'll give it a B.
But did you really need a tight end if you're the Raiders? Like, not at all.
It's kind of that thought of, like, we don't know where we're going to be a year from now. We could be picking top 5 a year from now, so it's almost that just, like, get the best player available kind of thing. And maybe they're taking a quarterback next year, the year after, and he's going to come in and sort of have some semblance of weapons around him. You also got Devontae Adams there.
It's an interesting way of building your offense, but I like it because I think, especially with them letting Renfro go, you're missing maybe that middle of the field guy. Yeah. Adams and Myers, great pair on the outside. I really like it. I think it's going to work out, and it's going to be fun for whatever quarterback is eventually there.
I'm up next at pick 14, and still there has not been a defensive player off the board, which is just crazy. But the Saints go out and they address a need. They take Tali Fuaga to Oregon State. I love this pick. For one, I don't think you can really go wrong taking an offensive lineman in the first round, especially early. And the Saints are kind of in a weird spot right now where they're not in a great salary cap situation. Derek Carr, we're kind of looking back at that contract like maybe it wasn't the best decision. So
I feel like we were saying that from the get-go.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
You're not really in a spot where you're going all out and you need to make this super aggressive pick. So to just shore up your roster, this is one where I think like 4 years down the road, you're going to look back and be like, oh, we're glad that we have this area bolstered. And Tali Fuaga, so good in the run game. Like, he just plays the position with so much power. He can play on the right side, either as a tackle, either as a guard. But what he's going to do for the Saints run game is just going to be great because he's a mountain mover. That's really the only thing I can say about him.
Love the versatility, and like it's a good safe pick and probably one of the best guys available.
Especially if Ryan Ramczyk is not healthy as well, which has been a concern as well. So makes sense for the Saints to make that pick. I'm up next. Finally got our first defensive player here coming off the board in this year's draft. Took a long time, as you mentioned. Broke a record. Laiatu Latu to the Indianapolis Colts. I really like it. I think looking at the Colts, they could have gone a lot of different ways. I'm going to give it a solid B because I still think I honestly would have liked to see them take a receiver. I think Brian Thomas Jr. would have been a really nice piece there to add to that offense with Anthony Richardson. And this receiver class is deep, so they could still add later in the draft. But pairing Thomas with Pittman and Josh Downs as well, I think would have just rounded out that receiver room and gave Anthony Richardson another weapon. They still have time to do that in this draft for sure. And I think defensively, you look at that team, you want to build especially up front. Team didn't have a lot of pass rush production last year, so makes sense taking a flyer on a guy like Latu.
Pick 16, the run on defensive players has begun, and to me, this was the best defensive player in this draft. Might have lost a bet of him being the first defensive player picked, but I love this guy. I think this is great for Seattle. I'm giving this an A+ because he was my favorite defensive player. I've been saying it all night before we started, within the taping. A 3-technique tackle is one of the hardest things to find, and they probably have an elite one that will be able to rush the passer. The comp they gave was Ed Oliver. Obviously, as a Bills fan, I love the way Ed Oliver plays. The size is similar, but it's the speed as well. I love this pick. I think it fits a big need for Seattle, and I think it's just a great fit.
All right, we're at 17 now. Dallas Turner to the Minnesota Vikings. You trade up with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Eric, you are grading this one.
2 trade-ups in one draft is crazy, but like I love it. Go out and get your guy. You lost Danielle Hunter. You replace him here. Like I just love the aggressiveness. Do I know if it's going to change a lot for the Vikings this season exactly? I don't know. Maybe I'm just still stuck on this J.J. McCarthy hate train. But, like, I don't know. I like the pick, and I'm glad that they didn't go out and take a receiver, which I think a lot of us were worried that they were going to do, and just be like, well, we think J.J. may leave. So, like, I like it. I don't know. Make your team competitive and hopefully push for it.
What's your grade?
Like a B+.
Solid. Good job, Vikings.
The tackles continue to fly off the board. I'm grading Amarius Mims going to the Cincinnati Bengals. Very, very interesting one. First of all, I love the philosophy. Protect Joe Burrow. We need to keep him healthy. I know it was an unlucky injury a year ago, but in general, when you pay a quarterback that top dollar, I know they have Orlando Brown Jr. and they have Trent Brown as their 2 tackles. You bring in Amarius Mims, someone who is more of a project maybe, did not play a whole lot in college, very, very limited snaps, but what we did see were those traits that you can definitely see transferring over to the NFL and turning into very, very physically dominant player. And I think Amarius Mims, in this particular landing spot where he doesn't have to play right away because of what they have on their roster right now, is very good. But also, like, Trent Brown has had a tough time staying healthy, so he'll definitely see some game time. I just don't see him as a day one starter at tackle. Maybe they'll try him at guard. But regardless, the fact that Cincinnati is understanding where their roster's at, understanding what's important, going out and taking offensive linemen. Love this pick. I can go with a B+.
All right, at 19, Jared Verse, the LA Rams finally making a first-round pick for the first time in a long time. A long time. They lost Aaron Donald this offseason, so it makes sense to shore up a position of need as far as a pass rusher goes. From watching Verse, like, I feel like he was my favorite edge rusher because you can see the power with him. Like, I know what I'm getting with him as far as pocket-pushing guy. Maybe he's not the most refined as far as his pass rush moves go, but if his one superpower is going to be that strength to push the pocket, then sign me up for that all day. He had a ton of pressures in college, top 5 in pressures at all NCAA football. So that's a number that I love if I'm a Rams fan, and they needed defensive help.
It's the athleticism with Verse. Like, this guy was a receiver earlier on in his football career, ended up bulking over 50 pounds during COVID, coming back and just tearing it up at defensive end. So the fact that he hasn't been playing the position that long and he's already this good, that's where you fall in love with him. It's just the traits, the power, like you mentioned, the speed. So everything else can be coached up. He can add to his arsenal of sort of pass rushing moves, and he's going into a situation where I think in LA, like, they know how to develop these guys. Aaron Donald could very well go down as one of the greatest defensive players in NFL history. So you have to be happy if you're a Rams fan right now.
I didn't even give it a letter grade, so I'm going to give it a B+. The Steelers at 20, Troy Fautanu, offensive tackle from Washington.
I'm going to give this a B+. We talked about it before. This was a great lineman draft, and this just falls into that. I said it a second ago when we were just talking about the Bengals, like, you're always going to need these linemen. It's, I don't know, just a good spot, good player, solid B+.
Gotta say, I'm a little surprised they didn't go center after losing Mason Cole. You have Graham Barton sitting there, a little bit more versatile. But the one thing that Fautanu is being lauded for is his versatility as well. It's been said he can play all 5 positions on the offensive line. I like him more on the left side. But the Steelers have been trying to solve this O-line problem for years now. So, I mean, anyone really would have been accepted by the fans.
It seems that versatility is becoming more and more important, as we've talked about, with guys. When you have to shuffle that line so much, you want a guy who can play all 5 positions.
And they go back to the well for the second straight year of taking an offensive lineman. So you clearly see them trying to get back to Steelers football, as far as we know, is having a good offensive line, running the football, smashing it down people's throats. Mike Tomlin loves that kind of style, and I think with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields there, that style is going to be even more important than it was with Kenny Pickett. So makes a lot of sense.
The Dolphins go pass rush at 21 with Chop Robinson. I'm going to give this one a B-. I think this is one of those situations where you're happy to see a guy like Chop Robinson land in Miami, where they have Bradley Chubb, they have Jalen Phillips. So I know both of those players are coming off season-ending injuries. So I understand the school of thought in wanting to kind of shore up your pass rush. But also, Chop Robinson is one of the most raw prospects. He did not have a lot of production at Penn State. Kind of similar to Odafe Owe there, another Penn State guy that went to the Ravens, who came in year one and just looked very fresh. So I like the fact that there's not going to be pressure on him immediately, and it's also a very important position, and Mike McDaniel loves his pass rushers. So it's not an amazing pick in terms of we know what we're getting from the player, and I also don't think it's an amazing pick in terms of the value of where they got him. I feel like they may have even been able to trade down and get him a little bit later, but addressing the pass rush is never a bad thing, especially in a conference where, I mean, Miami has been trying to tackle Josh Allen for forever now, so I don't hate it.
I get the not hating it. I think the production scares me for sure. But
For
like
sure.
you said, the landing spot kind of feels perfect because he doesn't have to come in and be the best pass rusher on that team. 22, the Philadelphia Eagles select Quinyon Mitchell. I think this was a lot farther down the board than anyone thought the first corner was going to go. And I think we thought Terrion Arnold might go in this range more so than Quinyon Mitchell, because I think people were talking about him like maybe at 8 to Atlanta, maybe at 12 to Denver. But we saw the run on offensive players. I give this one for the Philadelphia Eagles an A-. Quinyon Mitchell, I think the only question with him was just small school, right? Like production against the best, but he put some of those concerns to rest throughout the process at the Senior Bowl and things like that, where he was the best player in an environment with the best college football players, proving himself. And so I love the rise of that kind of player, best ball production of any player in this draft class as far as the DBs go. I think when you look at the Eagles, like they could not cover a soul last year or tackle anybody from the back end, so this was clearly a huge need for them. I also love that they still have Slay and Bradbury, where Quinyon Mitchell is not going to step in right away and have to be the number one corner on this team. They've got some youth at that position behind Slay and Bradbury, and when those guys are gone, this is kind of the next era of the Eagles' defensive backroom. So I love the pick. 23, the Jacksonville Jaguars trade back to this spot. Still end up with a guy that I think a lot of people projected them with, Brian Thomas Jr.
I think I disagree with almost everybody I've talked to about Brian Thomas Jr., just because of the fact that he gives me deja vu of Brashad Perryman. He is a big, fast receiver that runs 90% go routes, and he played on a team with, in a draft, if the best wide receiver prospect we've seen in a decade wasn't in, would have been the surefire lock #1 receiver taken off the board, Malik Neighbors. He was in a very good situation in college, and he is going into another good situation in the pros. So he really doesn't have a ton of excuses for a lack of production. And I think this is a pick that we're going to come back in 2-3 years and look at my take as either being completely horrible or completely correct, because I'm giving it a C+.
I think it's going to be completely horrible because I love this guy. I think he was a lot closer than those top 3 group as opposed to the guys we're seeing at the end of the first round. Guy had 17 tutties last year on one of the best offenses in college football. Everyone talked about Xavier Worthy in that record-breaking 40 time. This guy weighs 50 pounds more and ran a 4.31. He is your prototypical NFL X-wide receiver. All of his production is outside the numbers. We talk about this all the time. Anybody can kind of make business in the middle of the field. This guy is always on the outside. I think he's going to be great. Yeah, sure, he can only run one route. Who cares? Like, figure the rest out. He's just such a freak athlete, and we're just scratching the surface on his potential.
Brashad Perryman also ran a 4.340.
I love the scheme fit because
Just going to say.
in Jacksonville, you have Christian Kirk, who is absolutely not that boundary receiver who's going to beat guys with his speed deep. Like, I love him underneath, playing in the slot. Evan Ingram as well excels there. after losing Calvin Ridley, they don't have that like alpha guy go up and get the ball from Trevor Lawrence. This does make me sour a little bit more on the Gabe Davis signing because now I just think it's completely unnecessary, especially like Zay Jones is there as well. So now you're kind of in this logjam of unnecessary options.
I do like the scheme fit though specifically because I feel like the Jaguars were trying to force Calvin Ridley into being something he wasn't last year. I just don't feel like they ever got a sense of him fitting a piece to their puzzle. And I think that Brian Thomas Jr. will fit them a little better. But I do understand the concerns with him too because he wasn't my favorite receiver watching him either. So, pick number 24, the Lions trade up in Detroit. They make a splash, jump over the Green Bay Packers to select Terrion Arnold out of Alabama.
I'm kind of torn on this. I'm going to give it a B-. He looks really good in man coverage. Like all the tape looks really good, but I think he had like a bad 40 time. They say the speed isn't quite where it should be, but it really does fit a need with Detroit. And some of the mocks I saw, this guy was going like in like the 12 to 15 range at times. So to get him this late, fill a need, I trust defensive backs coming from Bama. So I think good pick, B-. Luca, you look different.
Yeah. Just had to pop in here to grade the Packers pick. This is the most Packers pick of all time. You know, passing up their draft crush and Cooper DeJean just had to be done. They take a tackle who can play inside, who's athletic. They're going to move him inside probably, and then he'll be another starting guy on the offensive line for years to come. We complain about it now, but it's probably a B+.
Why go O-line over defense? Because I feel like that defense had a lot of holes.
Yeah, but O-line is still their biggest need for sure. I mean, you lose Bakhtiari. There's a lot of question marks still. John Runyon's gone. So there's holes at right guard. There's still a question mark at left tackle. Center play wasn't great. So there's just, there's all kinds of things you can do with this Packers O-line. Kick Zach Tom inside. You just need more bodies there. We lost a bunch. So it's a priority.
Pick number 26, Graham Barton to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive lineman. I'm surprised that he lasted this long. I feel like he was kind of a late riser in the process, and a lot of people liked him because of his positional versatility. I'm going to give this an A. I love the player. Like, I think watching him is really fun. He's a powerful guy that plays every position on the offensive line and can play every position. Center and guard primarily are probably where you want him to play. But for the Buccaneers, I really like this investment in the offensive line and on the offensive side of the ball, knowing that, you know what, that's the area where, we paid Baker Mayfield, we've got Mike Evans, we've got Chris Godwin, Rachaad White had a great year. Let's just continue to improve that unit, and Barton seems like he's going to be a starter there for a long time alongside Tristan Wirfs on the offensive line. It's a great pickup for the Bucs.
Prepping for this can be pretty tough. We all know that, especially as you get to the late rounds. When I showed up to 277 today, Luca was grinding Graham Barton tape.
I was.
This guy was locked in.
I was locked in on Graham Barton.
Watching like center pulls
Oh,
and literally
man.
deep in like a Graham Barton blocking.
He's
tape.
athletic, he's quick, like he's powerful. I really, really think he's going to be an impact
You
player.
seemed pretty excited to talk about Graham Barton like before we started.
Oh, yeah.
And you're
Bucs
bang
fans,
on.
get fired up.
I'll go next with pick number 27. And that's Darius Robinson, the defensive lineman out of Missouri, going over to the Arizona Cardinals. I'm going to go with C+ on this one. Not to be too harsh, but I probably would have gone in maybe a different direction. Arizona's a team with so many holes, so I understand he was the highest guy on their board, and that's why they took him. I'm sure you're happy with how they're leaving the first round, coming away with Marvin Harrison Jr. and now Darius Robinson. But I honestly prefer Johnny Newton in this position if you're looking for an interior defensive lineman. I think he's one of those guys. I know size was a concern, but he can rush the passer, I think, a little bit better than Darius Robinson can. I feel like they could have gone in maybe a different direction in terms of position, and even the positions that they took, there's just a couple different players that I would have preferred.
Pick 28. We had a trade. I waited all night for the Bills pick. Sure enough, they traded with the Chiefs. Here's the thing with Worthy, and I'm gonna reference the note here. For all the talk about his speed, this guy had 6 catches last year that were 20 or more air yards. That is not a lot of production for a guy who's supposed to be this big play burner. A.D. Mitchell had more touchdowns, had higher yards per reception. So I think people often get seduced by the speed, and yeah, the 4.21's great, but this guy's a toothpick. If he went anywhere other than Kansas City, I would have thought it was a bad pick. But I hate that he's with Patrick Mahomes, and it's a good fit, so I'll give this one a B+.
Dude, like pairing him up with Hollywood Brown, like the Chiefs have burners now.
Scary. I did a Instagram reel before the draft of like the best 40 times for wide receivers.
Well, it does not translate well.
Doesn't translate well. None of them have ever had an 1,000-yard season. As far as the top 11, well, we'll see now with Worthy, he was the 11th, but the 10 previous receivers with the best 40 times never had an 1,000-yard season. The closest was Darius Hayward-Bay and Marquise Goodwin, who had like 950 each, or in and around that area. So it takes a lot more to be a receiver. But I think with Patrick Mahomes, it's the exception.
That's the thing.
It's the exception to the rule. Because I think if he went anywhere else, I would have hated it. Because he's the receiver I looked at as like, I don't trust it.
One thing I'll say about Xavier Worthy, though, is I feel like he has more to his game than some of these other guys who have come before him. I do like him as a little bit more of a polished route runner. I think he can do more than that. And you want to talk about fit. The Kansas City Chiefs just won a Super Bowl with one of the most lackluster receiving corps in the NFL, and Mahomes had such a tough regular season, and in the playoffs they just turned it on. Now you add Hollywood Brown to the mix. Now you add Xavier Worthy to the mix. So much speed, and then we all know how smart Travis Kelce is and how he can find pockets over the middle. And I'm starting to sit here again and being like, how can you stop this offense? And who would have thought we'd say that 2 years after they traded Tyreek Hill? They're back.
29, Dallas Cowboys. They traded down Tyler Guyton, offensive lineman. Makes a ton of sense. I'm going to give it a B. He wasn't my favorite prospect. I think there are some concerns, but at the same time, fills a big need. You lost Tyron Smith. That's a huge hole that you have to fill. They can reconfigure this however they want because Tyler Smith can also play tackle if they choose to have him there, or you could put Guyton to tackle, leave Smith where he's obviously more comfortable at guard and all-pro player. Great fit for the Cowboys. It's what they needed. Baltimore Ravens, pick 30. Nate Wiggins.
Yeah, I said to Pac before we, like, right when we got in here, he was like, who are the Ravens taking? I said Nate Wiggins. Like, it's such a Ravens pick. We needed help in the secondary. We went out and, like, you could tell they just loved this guy, and they were never moving. Like, anyone else could have been on the board at 30, and Nate Wiggins' name was still getting called. Fast corner, he's going to be able to close. They know their end goal is to take the Chiefs out of the playoffs. And you look at the players that have joined the Chiefs in Hollywood Brown, and now, thanks a lot, Bills, Xavier Worthy. You're going to have to be able to lock down the secondary, and that was one thing that, we over-indexed on against the Chiefs this year, and Travis Kelce just dominated the middle. So I think getting a player so fast can kind of help at least slow it down a little bit more by himself.
Yeah, watching him, I think you see the closing speed on all of it, of closing windows up. Receivers think they have separation at the top of their route, but he's so good at changing direction, putting his foot in the ground, and getting to the ball. It's going to be a very useful skill for some of the quarterbacks he's going to go up against. All that said, what grade are you giving for Nate Wiggins?
I feel like this is biased, but I feel like it's such a perfect fit, and it's such the perfect player. Like, I would give it an A.
Love it. 2 picks left. Both receivers. Let's start with San Francisco, pick number 31. They take Ricky Pearsall from Florida, a guy that I don't think any of us thought would sneak into the first round. You can understand why he's kind of grouped in to that kind of group of receivers that's like, oh, what's your flavor? Like, what do you want in a receiver? This, you said it, kind of feels like a Kyle Shanahan receiver. And this also could lead to, are they going to trade Brandon Ayuk? Because I feel like if they drafted an offensive lineman, those rumors might be put to rest a little more. They can still keep him, but this allows them to be a little more flexible.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm a little bit surprised with the whole story arc of the San Francisco 49ers, because earlier today the news came out that they might be trading Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel in an attempt to move up for maybe a Roma Dunze or maybe even as high as Malik Neighbors. Obviously that didn't happen. I still don't think they're gonna trade Brandon Ayuk, but this is kind of this insurance policy that now comes in. Do I think they necessarily needed to go and get him? Maybe not. But again, when you get this late in the first round, and I think another part of this is what we always forget is that there's also a second round and a third round, and there's 2 more days where teams can strengthen their team. So I feel like he was probably the highest guy on their board. They think he can come into their scheme and work well with Brock Purdy and all the other weapons that they have. Ladd McConkey was sort of the guy that I preferred over him, but I'm not going to go out and question the mind of Kyle Shanahan, one of the smartest offensive coaches in football. So if you're going to ask me for a grade, I'm going to go B- just because I don't think this necessarily changes the trajectory of the San Francisco 49ers franchise, but it's also a productive player that I feel like they can get something out of, and it's also insurance if things go further south with Brandon Ayuk.
All right, last pick we're grading here. The Buffalo Bills had it at 32. They tasted that sweet nectar of winning the Super Bowl, and then they traded that pick to Carolina. Carolina moves up one spot. They couldn't wait. They had to get in the first round.
lot. For that, it's about a 40-pick difference. They
To
did.
win the Super Bowl?
No. To move up. To win the Super Bowl.
Pretend that they're winning.
Yeah,
the
The
Super Bowl.
Panthers pretended they won the Super Bowl and got to pick in the first round. We
So-
love it.
From a Bills perspective, this trade really confused all of us, I would say, because we know the Bills wanted to draft a receiver. So, like, what were the conversations that go into that? Because it seemed like the Bills like Xavier Legette. I liked him. I think this is a good pick. I'm going to give this a B+. This guy had a weird career. His first 4 years at South Carolina, he did literally nothing. Like, look at the game logs. It's bizarre. And then his 5th year, he just breaks out of nowhere. We were just talking about Deebo Samuel. That's who he reminds me of. This guy's got a lot of Deebo in him. The toughness, like, I like this pick. I would have enjoyed seeing him on the Bills, but whatever. They can get either McConkey or A.D. Mitchell tomorrow. I'm going to give it a B+.
These are all our grades for the first round of the NFL draft. Really excited to be doing this. Let us know where you guys have people ranked, and thanks for joining us.
Tell Luca your draft day thoughts in the comments, please.
Worst movie of
Can't
all
believe Vontae Mack fell out of the first round.
We have sat at this table for like 5 hours, and the worst take comes in the final seconds. When he disparages the greatest movie of all time.
One of
Who
the
was the guy
worst
that
movies.
throw in the trade again? And
I want goddamn David
David
Putney!
Putney.